Okay, thanks. Hey everyone, welcome to ACDC 176, which I believe is the right number. Um, we had a meeting scheduled on March 5th, which the agenda was a little lighter that week, so we decided to go for an async version of things on the Discord. And in any case, yeah, so we have today's meeting, and I think we just moved the meeting number to this date. So number 176. Issue 1941 on the PM repo. I put the link here in the chat. It's the same issue that we had from when we would have had the last call. And there are a few things that I think we made some progress on that were scheduled for the 5th, but we'll touch on them today just to tidy them up. And otherwise, yeah, I think since there have been a number of other threads that have become relevant, so let's touch on those today. And yeah, so we have some things for Amsterdam. I think the main topic for today will be EPBS, a few other things, and then we'll touch on Hagota towards the end of the call. So let's go ahead and get started with Amsterdam. First off, would anyone like to give any observations or updates from DevNet Zero? So we did launch EPBS to DevNet Zero. Very exciting. I think the start was a little rocky. I was even looking yesterday, and it looks pretty good. Participation is all right. There's also a new thing I saw in Dora for proposals, and that one also looks all right. I think every so often there's some rocky epochs. But yeah, otherwise, as far as I've seen, yeah, client teams are working on just working through any bugs there and getting to a stable DevNet Zero. Anything else we should uh yeah, acknowledge with DevNet Zero right now? Barnabas?
Yeah, so currently we have Prism, Lighthouse, and Lodestar pulling the chain forward. We have onboarded now every single CI client. Nimbus is having peering issues. Taku is having unknown issues. And for Grandin, we're just waiting for a new branch, but they confirmed that they were able to participate as well in the local purchases test. I have tested exits yesterday. It was working on a local environment. Lighthouse is still unable to process exits. And we just did a bunch of deposits on level 0, as well as Lido is also doing some testing. So as long as nobody is triggering exits, the chain should survive. If we're going to see an exit, then yeah, Lodestar and Prism is going to be able to process it, but Lighthouse is going to have a hard time. Also, the epochs that you mentioned, Alex, before, we seem to be missing a few blocks. Prism seems to be missing a few blocks randomly. Maybe they can give us an update. I'm not sure if they have investigated it, but yeah,
I have a PR out to fix that. We can
okay.
merge that hopefully in the next 2 days. And we have figured out the issues for that.
Was this with the parent block that we were discussing on Discord? Any
No,
semantics
this
there?
is
Okay,
no,
something
no,
else.
no. This is because of we for to essentially to send for choice update to get. We were using the wrong safe block hash and finalized block hash. We were using the reorg payload as the block hash. Because of that, get doesn't recognize it, and we were not able to reproduce block.
Okay, gotcha. Sounds like a straightforward fix then. At least I hope. Um, cool. Wait, there's something Barnabas said that I had a question about. When you said when you're talking about exits, are these validator exits or builder exits?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Like exit is an exit from the point of view
Okay.
of the beacon chain. It's yeah. So the endpoint for the validator, sorry, the builder exits is now supported by Prism and Lodestar, and yeah, Lighthouse just unable to process the whole exit. I'm not sure if anyone from Lighthouse is in the call. I do see Mark.
I'm here. I'm just not sure I can comment on this.
Okay. Well, in any case, yeah, there are a number of things that, yeah, people are finding as we go through, yeah, just operating DevNet Zero and see what happens. Um, let's see. So, yeah, unless there's anything else to add concretely for DevNet Zero right now, again, there are a number of issues, I think, across most, if not all, the clients, but people are generally aware. Um, I was. Yeah, okay. So actually, POTUS wanted to say some things in chat, which is also something I wanted to touch on, just in terms of, yeah, the status here. Um, Getting to where we are today to the current spec. And I think that might be what you're talking about, POTUS, unless you mean something else.
Yeah, it's a couple of things are on the specs and other things are really just on implementation.
Okay. Yeah, you want to give us an overview?
Sure. I just want to be quick because mostly I would just want to call for people that are involved to like weigh in, and I just wanted to be this on the minutes of this meeting. So there are a few things that we need to make a decision. One of them is already in the agenda for today, which is this issue of the PTC. This is an issue that was found and raised by Nico from Lodestar. The issue, in few words, is that when we call to get the PTC with a head state at slot 31, we might get a different PTC than at slot 32, even with the same state that just advanced to 32. And this may cause a split when we back a block for that slot 32 might become invalid. There are a couple of PRs that are open on the spec to fix this issue. This is an issue that needs to be fixed, or we just don't include at all PTC attestations on blocks. There are a few options. This option should be waiting, and I'm hoping that for Monday, client devs will show up already with at least an opinion so that we can just choose. That's one thing. The other thing that was raised is with the issue of proving things on the CL side. Today, we have a block root that is exposed with a slot of delay on the EVM. And this block root might be actually would just change semantics when there are several block roots that actually are happening on the CL side, but they come without a payload. This is a new feature of EPBS that you can have blocks on the CL that don't come with a payload. And then the problem is that the next payload that actually builds on top of a few of empty blocks, it will include the parent's block root, and that part and the contract, the system contract that keeps the block roots will have a gap of blocks that are missing. So this might affect mostly pools that are staking pools that are proving, for example, withdrawals, or proving about slashings, or proving anything on blocks directly on the CL side. There are a few options. I'll write down a full what I think is the right fix, which is not do anything here and have pools proving using the parent block hash. I think it's just cheap. There's another option which is proving using the beacon state, but that PK from PandaOps showed that this was just too expensive. So again, if pools come up and say this affects us this way, we want this fix, or if you just want to sit down with us and discuss what are the options, that's going to be great. I see that Dima is already mentioning this for Lido. So okay, so it's good that Lido is already looking at this. There's another option, which is the engine API. EPBS will have, and this was already mentioned in ACDT, I'm just repeating it now for all the LDevs. EPBS will force reorgs to a previous head. So not only a reorg, but just a rollback of your head. And if that happens, the engine should allow us, must allow us to build on top of previous blocks. So if we send FCU with a previous head, this should not return an error on the EL. This is something to be aware, and this is something that needs to be specified. finally, the thing that Terence mentioned, this is not really what was causing failed blocks for Prism, but here's an issue. When we track finalization and justification or safe head or anything, this is also going to affect the fast confirmation rule. We track just the block root. This means that the block root is what people are voting on for target or whatever it is. It's true that we have enough information to track whether or not we're voting also for the full or empty target, but that's not what is in the spec today. So when we finalize a particular block root, we are not finalizing nor justifying the payload that was committed in that block. That means that the safe head, the justified head, and the finalized head should always be sent to the engine as the parent hash of the block, the consensus block that had the right block root. So this is a change that I suspect clients haven't had yet. Okay, so that's the last one that I had to have on the minute. So it's mostly EL devs and pools that should show up and talk about these issues.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. This last one, is this what Terrence is supposed to hear in the chat with this PR? Like, does
No,
this PR?
that last one was so Prism was doing something even worse. Prism
Okay.
was taking the block root and just putting whatever payload that block root had, even though that payload might not even be on chain, which is even worse than just than just putting it. So we were putting that payload if it was on chain or if it wasn't on chain. So the engine is not complaining if we put that payload when it was on chain,
Right.
but that's also wrong. And we were also putting it when it wasn't on chain, which is even worse.
Right.
What I put in the chat is actually what POTUS talked about on the third point, where that the EL needs to support reorg on top of empty, not only full. And then we actually saw that issue. Prism saw that issue with Gap. So yeah, we need this hopefully review and merge soon.
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. And yeah, that was a good summary. Marius, you've had your hand. Let's do that next.
Yes, regarding the EL stuff. So when I implemented it a bit naively. And what happened is that Geth nodes kept crashing. And the problem is that during sync, if we reorg to a block in basically our sync mechanism and our block advancing mechanism are racing. And so if you give us a fork trace updated during sync and we change the canonical stature of or the canonicalness of a block, then that will crash the sync. So what I've done right now for only for the DevNet is to say that yes, we are accepting reorgs to the parent, but only if we are not syncing. The syncing state is not super clearly defined in our code base. And so it might be also a bit different between clients. But I think there can be these issues where we are currently syncing or we are not, we just started a new sync cycle and then we get this reorg and then we reject the block with, I think we rejected with the syncing error or like the syncing flag, just so that consensus layers are aware that reorgs to a parent might not succeed if your EL node is in a state where it's not fully synced yet.
But in that case, we shouldn't even send a payload attributes, right? So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but at least in our implementation, that is very different. Like we are checking the canonicalness of the node in a different path than than the payload attributes. Like the payload attributes are happening way later. So, but what you're saying is basically we should only accept this if you're also sending payload attributes.
Right. So if no, we will send you an FCU with a previous block, because that's what honestly can happen. I suspect that if you respond with an error here, it's kind of irrelevant because it's the worst that can happen is that it's going to put us optimistic. But that was already the case because you were already syncing. So the next proposer will only be able to propose if it wasn't optimistic already, so it's fine. In which case that guy didn't have an error, and every node that was optimistic is just going to import nicely the next block. So I think it's no problem.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's something that CLs should be mindful of, or should know that we might pull you into optimistic mode if we are getting this a reversal of the head, and for ELs to also be mindful that we might have these reorgs that are kind of changing the canonicalness of blocks that are also included in the sync.
Can't that already happen though?
Not like this.
Okay.
Like if we have marked a block as canonical, it is yeah, it's a bit different to uncanonicalize it. This is like a new way of doing that. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what would help here? Like, is it a refinement to the spec? Should we just make sure we have testing in place for this? Something else?
Yeah, I think both refinement to the spec and making sure that we have the testing. Maybe the engine API test.
Okay. Is there an issue here or something written down that will help me check this? Yeah, Otis.
I actually think that we might be able to help. The way we work now is that we actually send an FCU to propose on top of such a reorg. So I think we might be able to coordinate in that we are only going to send this type of reorgs and this type of FCUs only when we are sending actual payload attributes. Because I think for a node that is just syncing, doing that such an FCU that rolls back is kind of useless if you're not proposing, because you are going to, the proposer will send such a thing and will just actually cause a reorg on the EL. So a tester that is just syncing can just send the next FCU with an actual honest reorg on the EL.
Terrence.
But there's also another use case as a RPC provider, right? If you're RPC provider, you're using the head on the RPC endpoint on the execution layer client, you may get the wrong information if they reorg back on top of empty. So I don't think the attribute is enough. We probably need to do this regularly for FCU as well.
No, that RPC provider is going to be providing information over its last head, which was that in the EL. And then the next block that is produced is going to actually reorg on the EL and is going to reorg the RPC provider as well.
I see. Yeah, I need to think more about this.
So I suspect that the EL only needs to deal with this when it's dealing with a proposer that is sending a payload attributes to actually trigger block production on top of a previous block.
Is that a similar thing that will already happening when we do late block reorg and the fork choice filtering? So when we roll, so it's what that happens at least in tech, we roll back our head to the previous block and then we produce the next block on top of the ancestor, and we don't send FCU in that case, rolling back the head. So it should be kind of similar thing.
Well, no, that's what I wanted to avoid actually. So for the CL reorg, we're doing this juggling and this thing that is just artificial because the EL doesn't know how to deal with this situation. So we actually avoid sending an FCU
Yeah. So
when we suspect that we're going to be reorging.
that was the reason why we have to do this send
Yeah,
this
so should
filtering.
override FCU and whatever this
Yeah,
traffic,
yeah, the
which is
should
just
override,
dirty in the
yes.
spec. But
Yes.
now not even that's going to work because you don't really know if you need to reorg back. That's going to depend on other attestations. So I think at least we should allow these FCUs when we are proposing. And if we're not proposing, it's fine.
Well, not really fine. It's just like, yes, it's fine from a technical perspective, but from the UX, it's pretty bad because the CL knows that the block is that the EL is giving out over the RPC is bad, and it waits until the next block.
Yeah, in that case, can we just have the CL update the EL when it knows?
Well, that's what we're doing now, and this is what's causing the errors from get. I'm happy if we keep it that way. We send FCU and then the EL
Okay, yeah.
replies.
And maybe I didn't follow, but then Marius, you're saying there's an issue with this current behavior?
Well, no, like the current behavior is fine as long as we are very clear that if the sync is still happening, that we can just return syncing to the TL.
Mm,
We should
okay.
make very clear that for people that are listening, we should be very clear that it's not that we're going to be rolling back head. This is happening on DevNet just because clients are voting incorrectly for empty blocks. So clients are signaling you should roll back, but in normal behavior, normal situation with the chain, with or without blocks, we're not going to be rolling back head. This requires a majority of clients voting incorrectly to saying that a payload did not exist.
But what does incorrectly mean? Like
Well,
the
today,
proposer has like the correct view, but somehow a majority has a different view.
no. What's happening on the DevNet is that, well, I think this was changed lately, but what's happening in the DevNet is that Lighthouse and Lodestar did not include the committee index being 1 when there was a missing payload, a missing block. So they were voting for the previous consensus block with committee index 0, and this means that they were voting for the empty consensus block. So that forced Prism to reorg the payload, and that's what causes all of these previous reorgs. But as soon as Lighthouse and Lodestar fixed this, I think this stopped happening.
Okay, but it
That's
seems, let's see.
theoretically possible anyway.
I didn't hear Enrico.
Sorry, it was on Stokes. Just saying that it is still possible that this thing happens.
It is possible that it happens, but it will require it's not going to be as common as in the DevNet. It's going to be something very, very unusual, as reorgs are unusual today.
Yeah, but I don't even want CLs to start being optimistically in sync where they start not
But what
doing
Mario
duty
said is
for
that
1 second.
it's not that you're going to become optimistic. What Mario said is you are already optimistic and it's going to return you sinking.
Are you sure?
Well, perhaps Marius can repeat, but I understood that this would affect only nodes that were already sinking.
Yes, it only affects nodes that are in the syncing mode. The problem is the syncing mode is a bit iffy defined. So if you are sending us on a bigger sidechain, then we might go into syncing mode. Or if there's, I don't know, a bigger reorg, like a normal reorg, then that also might put us into syncing mode. So it's not just the initial sync. It can happen that after the initial sync, you will also be kicked into the syncing mode. Like if the CL tells us, hey, we want to go to this block, and we have no idea about that block, that might put us into syncing mode.
Yeah, and as I understand, even if we think it will be rare, say on mainnet, this could happen. And then if we want to change the behavior, we should definitely make sure it happens. Like this isn't just like a transient DevNet thing. It'll work itself out. Right. Okay. In any case, I will track this somewhere. And yeah, we will do what we need to do to harden the specs here and our implementations. Yeah, just to make this work how we want. Okay. Um, since we've gotten into it, so yeah, there are a number of things POTUS touched on, I think most of them already. Let's see. Let's circle back to this 4788 issue. So yeah, I think POTUS gave a pretty good summary. Um, Essentially, now that we can have empty execution payloads under EPBS, 4788 doesn't quite work like we expect. And the question now is what we do about it. So yeah, there are a couple options. One of them is to do nothing, like POTUS said, which is what I kind of lean towards now. And the reason why is because given the way we have different history accumulators on the beacon chain, you can still get to the data you need. And maybe the proof looks a little bit different, but you can still do so. From there, yeah, PK brought this up that it is possible that if you need to go through this different path, the proofs might become bigger than we would like. And at that point, I would like to quantify the impact. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this problem right now or preferences on how we handle it?
I think there would also be a middle way when we basically put in the parent roots of full beacon blocks only. So we only have the gap for the empty ones. So we at least have all the beacon roots for blocks that have withdrawals and everything included. Would be a middle way of both.
Right. So yeah, this kind of gets very deep in the weeds, but how it happens is that you would have a beacon block, execution block. There would be a number of beacon blocks, no execution blocks, and then you would get to the next full slot, let's say. And then yeah, like one option here is I think this is what you're just saying, just not PK, like you pass all of the intermediate routes. I think you could get away with just passing the previous beacon block that was not empty, which again, the semantics are like pretty intricate. But at that point, then I think what happens is it looks transparent to ELs today. And like part of my point here is I don't think people really need the intermediate beacon blocks with empty payloads. And if somehow they do, they can go through this more indirect route. So yeah, like I think either do nothing or yeah, we try to pass these quote missing routes, or let's say differently, we pass the route that we would otherwise miss today. POTUS.
So the intermediate blocks will include a lot of information that might be useful for pools. Has this validator been slashed? Has this validator exited? And a bunch of things that can actually happen on the CL. The problem is that these things will not have any impact at all on money until the payload actually arrives. So if the question is, has this validator been slashed? Do we really need to know that it was slashed in this block? Or is it just enough to know that it is slashed now? Has this validator withdrawn? Do we really need to know that it withdrew in this particular CL block? Or do we need to know that it was fulfilled in this particular EL block? And withdrawals is very special because there will be no withdrawals in those empty blocks anyways. There's only withdrawals in the first one, and then the chain of empty blocks will just not process any withdrawals anyways. I think this can be exploited just using the parent block, and that's it.
Right. Yeah, like there is no execution for these empty payloads. So in terms of the EVM, which is where you would consume 4788, there's just no way to change anything. Dima?
Yeah. First of all, yeah, I do agree that most of the information that is on the consensus layer is not required to be delivered. Like the proof is not required to be delivered precisely against the exact block. So, for example, slashing, you can just prove that the validator is slashed, and doesn't matter if it's this block or 3 blocks away or something like that. That's true. However, there are at least 2 cases that we have already identified in Lido that do require us to point to a specific consensus layer block. The first case is when the consolidation happens. So we really need to have 2 adjacent consensus layer blocks, the one where consolidation was still pending and the other one where the consolidation was applied, so that we can do a correct accounting of balance being moved from one validator to another. And if this validators belong to, say, different entities or different staking modules or different structures or different owners within a protocol, that is crucial. The other thing that is way bigger and way more problematic and not that obvious, honestly, is to have the ability for the ZK Oracle. So we use oracles in Lido. Right now, we are still using trusted oracles, unfortunately, to argue about the TVL of the protocol. So what's the total balance of the validators as of a very particular slot? And again, even though there are no changes on the execution layer regarding to that, the protocol needs to have a very precise information about what was the balance of all of the validators within the protocol at a specific slot. And since we are gradually introducing ZK Oracle to later on probably replace the trusted Oracle, we indeed need to point to a specific consensus layer block or slot that corresponds to a particular slot, so that we can make all of these ZK proofs against this particular one. And again, even though, as I mentioned in the comments, it's not like the end of the world, and everything, Alex, you are mentioning and what Potus is mentioning is correct, that this information is still reachable. This information now is reachable in a different way, hence development, maintenance, and so on is required. So in general, I'm not a big fan of changing stuff just because it's easier to change this stuff and then later on require protocols that do rely on a previous behavior to now adapt to new behavior, unless the option to keep the old behavior is prohibitively expensive for the Ethereum developers. So from my point and from Lido point of view, I would say that it will be way better and way easier for us to have this missing roots back propagated in this or that way. And if you refer to the document linked, it's either option 3 or option 4. It's not the end of the world, but if we will go with the missing blocks, it means that by the time of Glamsterdam, we would have to redo a significant portion of the protocol that relies on this trustless proofs. And over the last years, we did a great job at adding this permissionless proofs to as many places as we can, so that the reliance on oracles is lower and lower. So to summarize it up, it will be way better if we will keep the original behavior of 4788, and it would save us a tremendous amount of effort that can be reallocated to other places, like stuff that we are currently working on, like consolidations of the whole curated set, and in the future transforming our community set into OXO2 as well. But this all requires time and effort, and whenever we introduce such a change that requires an intermediate attention from our side, we are getting further away from achieving long-term goals, like, again, increasing the number of OXO2 validators in the network.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks for the context. Okay. in terms of moving forward, so yeah, POTUS has this idea to think about the parent hash because I think that just makes the proofs less cumbersome. POTUS, are you thinking we do, let's call it option one from PK's doc? Just do nothing?
I haven't seen what PK wrote. Last time I spoke with him, we were thinking about using the fact that the block accesses the state and then using the state to proof against, and that is quite expensive. This adds like 22 hashes. But the thing is that we always have the parent hash, which points to the parent block, or the parent root for a block, which points to the parent block. Once you have a parent root, then you can just provide the parent root and it's only one hash to access your block root. So since we always have the block that we're interested in on chain or its child on chain, then it just adds a single hash to prove against the block that you're interested in the worst scenario. So I think it's really cheap to prove against blocks and not the state. But it requires changing contracts. So I empathize with this. Even it might be that it's just the same cost, but then just changing the contracts and auditing the contracts and whatever it is, and deploying these new contracts might be just already prohibitively expensive for pools. So I empathize with their points. I have no opinion. I'm just saying that if we prove with block roots, it should be just essentially just as cheap as it is today.
Right.
Yeah, the other small thing here, and I'm super sorry that no one from Rocket Pool is here because their architecture is slightly different from Lido. And in Lido, we can basically do upgrades via a governance vote, which is complex and costly, but not impossible. For Rocket Pool, they have a different architecture where it might be even more problematic for them not to develop and deploy the code, but to make their mini and now mega pools to upgrade to this thing. So I'm not that well into Rocket Pool architecture, but I think we should definitely reach out to them directly and ask how much of a problem it would create for them because their architecture is slightly different from Lido's.
Yeah, I can make sure we talk to them. I also believe Eigenlayer uses 4788. So yeah, we can do a sort of an impact analysis here. What I think the highest cost is would be changing the system contract. So yeah, I'd strongly prefer to not do that. Then from there, the question is, yeah, how nice can we make it? I think some combination of option one, which is where we add this rule that you would send the most recent non-empty beacon block as the parent. I think that handles most of the things. There are possibly some transitions only in the beacon blocks that would be missing, and you'd have to go through this more indirect route, maybe than what POTUS is suggesting is a good mitigation there. In any case, yeah, we'll need to do a little more analysis here. But yeah, we should definitely figure this out in like the next couple weeks in terms of how we want to actually move forward. Okay. Any other comments on this one? Otherwise, we'll move forward. Okay. Okay, the next thing I had here, this was also something POTUS mentioned with this PTC issue. So I linked what I think as of yesterday was the latest active PR to handle this. There was another one from Inflag that looks like we should also look at. So yeah, these are the straightforward solutions given today. I looked into this some earlier this week, and I started to go down this thread where I'm not sure we actually even need to put the payload attestations on chain. And then at that point, we have more flexibility, I think, in the specs, and we can just say, hey, you're expected to have these committees cached, and then you just use the appropriate committee for the right slot. And then there's no issue with the state changing on you. That being said, there is some argument that having them in the blocks and process like we do today makes things a bit more stable. I started looking more deeply into the fork choice to try to wrap my head around this. I don't have a clear answer there yet. I believe POTUS, just from talking on Discord, it seems like you prefer to keep it as is. Is that still correct?
Just for disclaimer, I believe Francesco is fine with removing them, and I would just take Francesco's voice on fork choice over mine. But
Okay.
I also believe that it's clear that well, I am wary about ex-ante reorgs that can be produced by removing this. If you can convince somehow on a split decision, or if you can convince the next proposer that he should reorg the payload, and then it turns out that the next proposer is being reorged because he tried to reorg a payload, I think having the PTC in the block ensures that the view of the proposer is the right one.
Yeah. That intuition makes sense. The part that I haven't done myself yet is just look deeply enough into the fork choice to see if this actually holds. Because I think it's possible today that this works more like a hint to the next proposer.
No.
And then,
So the proposer, so it is a hint to the next. The proposer is never forced to reorg a payload. So the fork choice today is such that the proposer always has a decision to build on full if he's seen a payload, and if he's seen a payload, it doesn't matter what the PTC done. He's verified the payload. He can always build on top of full. The question is, what happens if a proposer decides to build on top of empty for whatever reason? And then in that situation, we might want to allow that proposer to actually build on empty. If there was a split view, if there were equivocations, if there were a bunch of situations. And in those situations, this PTC on the block ensures that the proposer's view is respected by the testers.
okay, because then that same proposer includes the payload attestations that everyone else then sees.
Yeah, because imagine, for example, the PTC is actually equivocating. It's sending attestations to attesters, and it's sending a different attestation to the proposer. So these kind of things might be resolved by the proposer asserting these are the ones that I'm considering. There's no slashing for PTC, for example. This is one of the few things that get. It's not that it's very important, and I'm also like envisioning a not canonical behavior by the proposer, because if the proposer had processed the payload, he should propose on top of full. He shouldn't be proposing on top of empty. But on the other hand, not including this and not allowing proposers to reorg payloads, I think allows timing games with builders and off-protocol arrangements of the next proposers with the builders so that the payload can actually come later, and a bunch of other things.
Yeah. Okay. So in any case, like as is, we do need to say merge one of these PRs. And then at that point, I'd prefer like the simplest thing that gets the job done. And it looks like this latest PR 5020 does that. So in any case, I think today, or at least for now, I would ask people just to look at these. And yeah, ideally, we can make a decision in like the next week, like possibly even by ACDT on Monday. Oh, do you want to say more about that, POTUS? Because yeah, that's what I meant is it just has the least impact on the state. Because otherwise, like in general, we just keep adding things to the state to patch these issues, and then the state becomes gross. Okay. So, okay, yeah. Take a look. I think, yeah, to fully grok this, it's actually pretty subtle. But yeah, take a look and then let's just keep chatting about this. Perhaps by next ACDT, we'll feel more strongly about one route versus the other. What do you mean we're shipping this in DevNet 1? Like one of these PRs?
Yeah, so this is the one thing that it will require a hard fork. So this is the only feature that will force a new DevNet. I think all of us don't have complete implementations of EPBS. That's why we're seeing a lot of bugs, and not even bugs, just things that we haven't implemented and we keep implementing and testing on DevNet Zero. So DevNet Zero is very useful for us. But the one thing that will be a hard fork will be this. So this will force a new DevNet.
Right. Assuming we don't go down this other route of even just taking them out and handling this a different way. But yeah. Okay. I think we
taking them out is also hard fork. So
yeah. But no, more just like I think okay. No, just for my own understanding of the timelines here. But yes, it would be for sure. Okay. So yeah, I think that's all we're gonna do on that one for now today. So yeah, please take a look if you have a minute. Review these PRs / if you prefer one over the other, please add a comment on the PR as well. That would be helpful. Okay. Let's see. So Lotus, at the beginning of this call, you touched on these two things that we just discussed. There was this engine API PR that I think is smaller in scope that I think we just need to merge, and this is 770 to be clear. There was also this issue that we were discussing for a bit around the syncing semantics and reorgs there. I don't see something written down right now to track that one, but I will do something unless I can find something that exists already. One more to discuss. So yeah, I was trying to keep a list of like kind of open things in terms of getting towards Amsterdam DevNet Zero, where we would merge this all together and then move forward, and broadly towards shipping Amsterdam. One more thing that I think we still need to discuss a bit more was this concept of the variable PTC deadline. Certainly, the flow should be to iron out the current DevNet and just all the mechanics there. But then I think there's at least some interest in exploring this variable PTC deadline in a future DevNet. So from there, I think I just wanted to bring it up just so everyone's aware of the status there. Although Tony had a document, and yeah, if you'd like to say a few words, Tony, this would be a good time.
Yes, I will quickly post it into the chat, including the PR. This is one of those open points that are still discussed with EPVS. Like, should we do a variable payload deadline that is independent from the PTC deadline? And I thought it might make sense to also look into the call data pricing, because on the EL we have a call data pricing that is very much focused on capping the worst case while staying as much backwards compatible as possible. But this also means that the worst case block size can also include quite a lot of execution. So there is EAP 7976 that is CFI'd for Amsterdam. And with that EAP, the worst case block size is capped at 60 million gas, you would be at 1 megabyte. But you could still use like over 90% of the gas for execution. And there has been a discussion among clients to enshrine snappy compression, but what I read was clients are very much against that because this could lead to other failures, consensus issues or something. So if we want to anchor the payload, the variable payload deadline based on the uncompressed block size, then I don't think it's a good idea, because you could create a 1 megabyte big uncompressed block and one block compresses to 100 kilobytes, the other compresses not at all. So I have some charts in the blog post. Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on it and would just say, let the clients take the shot. But I definitely think, we should find a solution there.
Right.
Yeah, Mark, yeah.
Yeah, I spent a while combing through the Zatu data to try to figure out what we were looking at in terms of how basically the end-to-end dissemination time varies with the payload size. And I mean, it seems like if we don't do a variable deadline, we're forced to basically set the block deadline back in order to accommodate the larger payloads that are slower to propagate. But on the average case, payloads are significantly smaller than those more extreme cases. And so, we've artificially lowered the gas basically. And I think the headline from the results that I saw is that we should gain somewhere between 300 to 500 milliseconds for execution with a variable deadline, which is not nothing. But I agree with certainly with Tony's conclusion that EIP 7999 seems like the real way to solve this problem. That was just my attempt to quantify this in terms of like how much can actually be gained. And yeah, like I said, 300 to 500 milliseconds for execution is what I had found.
Okay.
Yeah,
Which is
thanks a lot,
substantial.
Mark. Maybe just to add one more thing. If we want to do it, then we should also rethink if we actually want to just linearly interpolate between 3.6 seconds and 9 seconds, because today there is a lot of room towards the maximum block size. So the average block size is significantly smaller than the worst case. And if we would just naively interpolate, then most of the blocks would have a deadline at second 4. And this seems unrealistic. So we cannot demand builders to publish blocks very early, or I guess this would very much defeat the purpose of EPBS helping to scale. So if we want to do it, we should rethink the formula. And also, the PR currently has a worst case block size hard coded at 10 megabyte, which is I guess I get where it's from, but I think it should be significantly lower, and it should be calculated based on the gas limit, because we know gas limit divided by the call data cost is the worst case block, at least as of Amsterdam. And then the formula already improves, but we're still like, we would still end up with a very early payload deadline, eventually giving the CL like 6 or 7 seconds to execute. And I don't think we can ever scale the CL to make use of that. The EL to ever make use of 6 or 7 seconds of worst case execution.
Okay. Any other comments on this for now? I don't think we're going to make a decision today. And yeah, it's just kind of a gray area around how we want to do this, at least for now. So I would suggest, yeah, let's just think about it some more, and I think we'll have more clarity in the future. Okay. Let me find the agenda. Okay. Yeah, so that was super helpful. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, we need to get through all these things at some point. They're very much top of mind, especially for, as we think about DevNet 1 and potentially DevNet 2. That being said, I think we have plenty to do for DevNet 0 right now. Zooming out just a bit from there, I did want to think about Amsterdam, DevNet 0, and like our path there. And again, we'll have to see how this goes, but it would be nice to get to something end of April in terms of Glamstream DevNet 0. And that would mean merging the two different CL and EL work streams, both BALs and also EPBS. But then from there, that would be nice in terms of us now merging the streams and being able to work together on the actual hard fork. Does anyone have any thoughts on that timeline? Oh yeah, okay. I mean, this is what I meant end of April, sorry, but yeah, mid-April. Essentially before interop is what I'm getting at. Barnabas, I think we can just make a call on the PTC Monday, and I think that's going to be fine. Okay. It's at least from the lack of responses, this doesn't seem an inappropriate suggestion. So let's just go ahead and pencil that in. Let's all try to work towards Glamsterdam DevNet 0 mid-April, which is roughly a month from now. And cool. Okay. I think that'd be good. From there, there were a few things that are Glamsterdam related, but not as specific to the CL, and a few things that were on the agenda from what would have been last ACDC's time slot. Let's run through these. I believe it was okay. Spencer wanted to SFI the ball DevNet 2 EIPs into Amsterdam. Okay, he also says he won't make the call, so I guess he's not here. But yeah, anyone opposed to this? I think my first question would be, is DevNet 2 stable enough? I feel like that's a pretty reasonable blocker on making something CFI to SFI.
From my perspective, DevNet 2 has been pretty stable so far.
Okay. Does anyone have a reason not to SFI these? One thing I can point out is this is a CL call and not an EL call. And I'm not trying to delay another week, but yeah, it's the EL side on score. So I'm not trying to delay another week, but it is slightly more appropriate to handle next week. For example, I don't know if the right amount of EL devs are even here today. Okay, so then let's handle it this way at least. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there are any strong opinions either way on the CL side, but it does seem more appropriate to be an EL call decision to make on the EL call. So let's just push this next week. We make SFI decisions on ACDT. I mean, again, I think if you have the right people at the right place at the right time, then it doesn't matter as much. Do we think we can make that happen for Monday? Okay. How about oh yeah, Oscar's saying he wants to discuss next week on ACDE. Okay. Then sure. Um, Barnabas, okay. I'll just follow Oscar on this. Let's discuss this a week from now on ACDE, and yeah, we can get into that conversation there. Okay. What I was going to say on guard then is Barnabas could optimistically try on Monday. But again, I think it needs to be like it can't be just like a few EL teams being like, yeah, let's do this. Like it should be the full set that have the option to weigh in. So in any case, let's fall back to doing this next week, I would suggest. And okay, it sounds like you guys can discuss further. Okay. Okay, next thing, the SSD engine API. So this was from Julio. He had some PRs. I think I also saw a very similar PR from Barnabas. And my understanding is that what we want to do here is support SSD as like a transport encoding for the engine API, especially for pushing blobs back and forth. This should help quite a bit. And I think now there have been some benchmarks to prove this point. So there was a thread on Discord that got quite a bit into this. And yeah, I don't know if anyone would like to. Okay, there are 122 messages. Um, there's quite a bit here, but ultimately, yeah, I mean, again, I think, I would say this makes sense to do. And then from there, we can discuss when. Um, do we want to go ahead and try to do this in Amsterdam?
So I basically propose this in order for us to be able to do a performance upgrade without needing to even have an EIP for it. I proposed a engine API change only, which could be an optional thing. So we could basically have all the CRs supported basically as early as tomorrow, and all the EAs could opt in. And when they end up supporting, then the negotiation would basically go into SSD instead of JSON.
Yeah, I mean, I like that approach. Essentially be opt-in for whoever supports it, and then you get the performance benefit.
Right. The major question is basically finalizing the spec and see if the spec is fine by everyone.
Yeah. Marius and then Julia.
Yeah, so I I personally think we should take this opportunity to also rethink the engine API. Makes no sense to me to just do the same thing that we have right now with the engine API and move it to SSD. Yes, it's a bit of a performance improvement, but it just adds a maintenance burden on all of the ELs. I think the way I would like to do it would be to take this as an opportunity to rethink how we are doing the engine API, how we are doing versioning in the engine API, how we are defining structs in the engine API, and so on. Because yeah, that is gotten kind of out of hand. The engine API implementations in the clients are pretty ugly. Now that we have done like 4 or 5 forks on top of on top of the original engine API, and so yeah, I think yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that sounds like a much bigger set of work than just supporting SSD as an optional transport. So, how do you think about that? I guess you're saying you think we should just go ahead and do it now. Julia?
Yeah, so actually, I think I mean, so first of all, I agree with Marius, mostly directionally. I think that kind of you can also do this in kind of incremental steps too. Like you don't need to do everything. Like, you know, if you can introduce a way to optionally support multiple ways of implement engine API, you can first do SSD and then do a better engine API on top of it without blocking anything. Like you can have a three thing work on three things at the same time. It's not, I mean, you just need a way to you know, you need to give away the CL to expose it. So I think you can pretty much do both if you really want. Like you can first you can do the SSD thing, and then you can also in the meantime try to find a way or create a spec to improve the engine API. It's not entirely clear to me. I mean, I think it can be improved, but it's not entirely clear to me how it can be improved. So yeah, maybe there needs to be some ideas on that. But I overall agree directionally. But we can do this in incremental steps still. And people don't need to implement the SSE either. It's optional. So if Geth doesn't want to implement it, they just don't implement it. And if Netherman wants to implement it, it's their business whether they're fine with the complexity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sure, Barnabas.
Yeah, I would be just curious to know like what kind of exact changes Marius was thinking about making. He says that like the versioning is a bit ugly, but like I'm not sure what the exact solution is that would make it less ugly.
What?
Yeah. kind of what Raul is saying, what Perry is saying, the versioning system of the engine API method is just really dumb. And the way we are constructing structs means that at least with the engine with the SSC implementations that we have, we need to create a new struct for every fork. I think the CL devs have the same problem, but instead of fixing that problem, we are kind of now importing the same problem to the EL, and yeah, it's then the way we specify some parameters, the way we specify functionality and behavior is kind of very annoying. Like the way we specify errors in the engine API, and I think all of this needs to be changed.
Yeah, roll.
Yeah, so to add to that, maybe the networking perspective here is besides kind of like the semantics, the versioning, and the error handling and so on. One principle that I would like to see on a revamped engine API is something that allows EL and CL to coordinate a lot better about where they are in the pipeline, and specifically on the CL. So the reason for this is that our resource constraints or requirements are shared, specifically when it comes to bandwidth. So it really helps if the EL and the CL can be telling each other continuously where they are in kind of like the pipeline. So for example, when the CL is done receiving receiving blobs, for example, then it can tell the EL that it's done so, and the EL can then throttle traffic on the mempool accordingly, or throttle sync traffic, which is kind of like not on the critical path accordingly. And ideally, if they have kind of like a shared view of bandwidth, of available bandwidth, which like we have several ways of achieving, then they can basically implement some we can implement traffic shaping that allows both layers to actually act as one and not kind of like be conflicting with one another, and kind of like, you know, over shared resources. But this would require like different, maybe like a different set of, I think it requires a different set of interaction patterns. So right now we have this RPC approach, which is synchronous, and we would probably need more streaming oriented patterns, and maybe there's like some WebSockets kind of like approaches that we can add here, some multiplexing. There's a bunch of notions from the networking side of things as well that we can bring into this API design.
Julia?
Yeah, I guess what I think maybe should be done is that we could take Barnabas spec, just kind of rename this in, like, sorry, there is a bit of noise because I'm outside. There is a so what we can do is that we can take Barnabas spec, rename it as kind of to be, you know, a next gen API instead, or whatever name we want to give it, honestly. First iteration might be only SSE, right? And then maybe we can just, you know, create some kind of devnet and then iterate over it, and just do all of our do a bunch of changes to it that we like. I'm not sure actually what you can do about the versioning, honestly.
Yeah. So, in terms of change management, what I would do is I think what Barnabas was proposing is basically like a content type header sort of thing. I think it's pretty much a direct translation of the types into SSE. I think that should be something we do regardless. And then on top, then like the next gen API would be another effort, but it doesn't necessarily, like, you could technically conceive a world in which you still do JSON, right, for this new design, which we want to, but hopefully. But yeah, I think it's decoupled efforts. I would go, the SSE one seems like a pretty quick win, to be honest, especially as we scale the number of blobs.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Okay. Well, we can do it incrementally. It's not like we need to do everything in one go. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, maybe SSD is just probably, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have really a strong opinion, but in my hunch would be that doing it incrementally is better. So do SSD first and then maybe
Yeah.
switch later.
For blobs, for blobs, what's important is that whatever serialization format we pick is zero copy, and that
Yeah.
clients implemented in a zero copy way. Because right now the JSON base 64 encoding decoding is what's killing us, and it's just absurd.
Well, you cannot do it zero copy regardless because you need to end. I mean, unless you can do it
Well,
zero
with SSZ, you can definitely do zero copy
you
on
do
the
less
reader side.
copies. I mean, you do less. I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that. Like you can do less copies, yes, but it's a bit more complicated than that. I wouldn't call it zero copy. Anyways,
all right, I have to check. Last time I checked, I was pretty sure that I got a zero copy version working, at least in Rust. But yeah.
No. Well, okay. This goes into details, but it's not zero copy unless you send over the C struct over TCP, right? Like that's zero copy. But no. But I don't want to argue on that. I understand what you mean.
Yeah. Okay.
I understand what you mean. Sorry. It's just I was being a little pedantic. But anyways, what I wanted to say was, yeah, maybe we should just do SSD. Also, SSD is super simple. I mean, it took me like a weekend to open PRs in like 8 clients. It's not like, and it doesn't take that much time to refine them into being decent. It's just, it's pretty simple. I mean, to be honest, I want to be completely clear here. It was just this was just for me just an AI experiment. And what ended up coming up was honestly pretty decent. It will take me probably a week to just refine all of these PRs into something that works and that is decent to look at. I already have made kurtosis devnets for all of these clients, and I already bombard them with blobs. I also wrote an article in research on this, so this is pretty easy. This is pretty quick. Yeah, and to make this code better, I just need to spend probably like a week working on this. It's not like that much time for me to do. Like it's a one-person job to make this happen quickly.
Okay, yeah, let's zoom out a little bit. It sounds like there's certainly interest in making some change here. It does sound like a good first step would be thinking about SSZ for especially the blobs. It sounds like a deeper conversation around general changes and improvements to the engine API. So, yeah, would Barnabas's PR be a good place to start? And yeah, if you care, well, we can move forward the conversation there. Okay. Thank you, Barnabas. So take a look at this PR 764, and I think the question is just fitting in, actually getting something together. But sure, Julia, if you want to bring it up there, that would make sense. But yeah, I think if anything, the takeaway for today is we want to do something here, and then we just need to figure out exactly what that is. Okay. There was one more thing that's not quite a good, so let's just go ahead and knock it out. And this was from Bowman Apps. I'm not sure how you say the handle, but essentially it was a standardization question for the JSON Web Token, I believe is what this stands for, secrets. This is going, quite back into history. But there was an ask for the client behavior here, just so we could tighten the spec. I think this is saying it might be a should, and the question is if we can make it a must. But in any case, does anyone have any thoughts on this? Let me grab, I think this is the relevant PR. Yeah. I would imagine, given how old this is, clients have some way to handle this, and it works, TM. Okay, yeah, if you want to dig into this more, take a look at the PR. But otherwise, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is Hegota. So yeah, two things here. One of them is just around timelines for scoping. So we have picked the CL headliner for Hegota with Fossil. They are still working on the EL side to pick a headliner there. I believe the plan is to make a decision next week on ACDE for the headliner. And then from there, I will go double check the ETH research post where we're kind of tracking this formally. But in any case, the suggestion would be that we open up not headliner. Let me say this a different way. We would open up the non-headliner proposal window as of that call, so a week from today. And then I think roughly there'd be about a month for proposals, and then we would continue the scoping process with the non-headliner EIPs there. That was all I really had to update there, more of an FYI. I think, again, the next step here will be finalizing the EL headliner for Hegota, but something to have on the radar. And last thing on the agenda, let me just take a look. I think we've covered the other stuff. Okay. Yeah, okay, there was a comment, but it's related to this. Let's see. I don't know if this is Greg or G Kumot, but they had a comment here just to talk about EIP 8141. So I think the idea is they would want to propose this as a not headliner EIP for Hegota. And given what I just said, we're maybe a call or two early, but we do have some time. So if someone here would like to say a few words, I think this is a good moment. And then we can wrap up today after that.
Yeah, cool. So let me grab like 5 minutes of your time, guys, to give a short introduction of the EIP we are proposing to as a non-headliner for Hegota. This is EIP 8148. And the core idea of this EIP is to add a so-called custom sweep threshold for validators with compounding withdrawal credentials. This threshold basically defines the value of effective balance above which the validator rewards will be swept to execution layer in the same way it currently works with max effective balance. And the main motivation to even introduce this feature is to allow validators not to choose between, like, do we want to get our rewards after we are at 32 ETH for traditional validators, or if we want to get our rewards after 2048 ETH for OXO2 validators, but rather select any value in the middle while still utilizing OXO2, which means that we will now be able to offer this convenience of automatic sweep for any validator that is in between 32 ETH and to 2048 ETH. And as mentioned in the last comment to our today's issue, a lot of ecosystem participants report that the main reason why they are not consolidating their validators to OXO2 is the liquidity problem, because the step of 2K ETH is a pretty significant one. And even if you have more than 2K ETH, but it's not like equally precisely divisible by 2K, your amount of ETH is not precisely divisible by 2K, it would mean that for some of your validators, or if you have a lot of them, you will have to do manual partial withdrawals if, for example, your business model does not correspond to a system where you simply accumulate rewards and that's it, and when you need this extra liquidity on the execution layer. So this applies both to mid-sized home and solo stakers. This applies to a professional operators who might have clients that are willing to have their ETH exclusively at only their validators, and their amount of deposit that they have deposited to that they have delegated to a professional operator is not a multiple of 2K. So that's the motivation. And we believe that by introducing this very simple and small change to Ethereum network, we would be able to significantly increase the rate of consolidations or migration to OXO2 validators by offering such a small but very useful thing. Now to a bit of a technical details on how this functionality actually works and why we believe that it would not introduce any additional risks or concerns to the protocol. So first of all, the requests to set custom sweep threshold for the validators are made from validator withdrawal credentials following the same process as we already have for partial withdrawals and triggerable exits and consolidations. So no major changes here, the same architecture of the contract, the same fee inhibitor, and so on and so forth. Next, custom sweep threshold is set with a step of 1 ETH to match the effective balance increment so that you can only set your custom sweep threshold as a multiple of 1 ETH so that it would match, potentially match the effective balance. Next thing, custom sweep threshold can only be set above the current validator balance to prevent usage of this feature for bypassing regular withdrawals. Which means that you would not be able to set this threshold below your balance and then within the next sweep cycle get some of your ETH swept. You would only be able to set it above so that you will need to first accumulate enough balance, and only after that you will start participating in the automatic sweep. Next thing, custom sweep threshold can be changed at any moment in time and any number of times for a given validator, assuming that the new value that is provided for the custom sweep threshold is below the current validator balance. Custom sweep thresholds are proposed to be stored as a separate list in the beacon state and not in the validator structure, in the validator object, so that we do not surpass this limit of 8 fields in the validator structure, and so that it would not affect the way how we Merkleize the state, particularly validator objects. And the last thing is that custom sweep threshold can be set for any value starting from 33 ETH, which is min activation balance plus 1 ETH, to allow for the maximum flexibility and encourage migration of any sized stakers, starting from those only having, I don't know, like something like, I don't know, 36 ETH, for example, and those who are not using this for ETH in staking at all, moving towards people who have, for example, 2 solo validators and might want to have this sweep threshold at 64 ETH, and all the way up to a pretty large validators or home stakers who might have, say, 1.5K worth of ETH, but they still want to limit the amount of ETH that will be accumulated on their validator and get the rest swept. So that was a short description. Again, to wrap it up, the main idea of this EIP is to make OXO2 and potentially OXO3, but right now I'm not sure because when I was writing this EIP with my co-contributors, OXO3 validators were still validators. Right now they no longer are. So let's assume it applies to OXO2 validators. So the idea is to make OXO2 validators way more user-friendly so that people can select at which threshold they want to automatically get their rewards. And we believe from our talks with ecosystem participants, with home stakers, with professional operators, that introducing this feature would significantly increase the rate of migration from old OXO1 validators to a new OXO2 validators, and would basically make OXO2 validators suitable for everyone who is running validators on Ethereum. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, that was a nice overview. There was some discussion in the chat, and yeah, I guess I'll say, yeah, we did originally consider something like this with the consolidations design in Petra. Petra got a little too big for its own sake, and so it was not included. But yeah, in general, this is a nice idea. yeah, something to consider.
Yeah, the quick comment on that. Yes, this idea indeed was considered back in the day when Pectra was about to go live. And as far as I understood from reading all of the discussions, all of the memos and stuff like that, the major reason for not doing it in Pectra was the concerns regarding timelines, the amount of work required, and no significant support from participants like protocols and maybe other staking participants. However, right now it is apparent that this feature is needed. And if we will have time and space in Hekota to implement this, again, relatively simple feature, it will be great to have it now, because right now it is apparent that without this feature, the rates of migration to OXO2 is pretty slow. Right now, we are at below 20% of stake being on OXO2 validators 1 year after Pectra. And in my opinion, this is unacceptable, and we should do our best to increase the rates of migration. So even if, with this limit, even if a solo staker with just 2 validators would transform his 2 validators into 1, it would already be a 2 times decrease in the number of validators. And as we can see from the data, most of the solo home stakers and again, professional operators are controlling way more than just 64 ETH, which means that we would definitely see a major reduction in the number of validators. And as far as I'm concerned, this is exactly the goal we are trying to achieve, so that we can enable fast finality and many more other features.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the intro. And again, we will get deeper into the non-headliner EIP set in the future. But yeah, this is a good one to have on the radar. We are at time, so I think we go ahead and wrap up for today. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.